Okay, I'm going to do a short video, sort of a HQ assessment for Tyranids, and let me start with the fact that, unlike the majority of loud voices on the net, many of whom I don't think are actually playing Tyranids, I actually like this new codex. I think it's an awful lot of fun. It's been more fun than many other armies to play because it's got so much ability to, for customized variation in what you put down on the table, despite what people say. Anyways, so the Warlord for any army, but let's say for Tyranids in particular, the Warlord is one of the features of your army that is going to win or lose a game for you in many situations. If you're playing Relic, you don't want to lose your Warlord if you don't take the Relic, because you don't want to hand over that point to your opponent. The Warlord, he's got the ability to boost your army with a Warlord trait, but it's very random and often not that useful. It's got a little bit of use, but it can be quite random. So the Warlord can be this liability, because your opponent's going to target your Warlord. You know your opponent's going to target your Warlord. And in some missions, that one point's critical for winning the game. This could be extra true in tournaments, because in tournaments, the Warlord, you may not get 4 or 5 rounds in. In a tournament, you may only get 3 rounds of gaming, 4 times up. So people may really try to kill that Warlord to get that point, because they might not score all the objectives. And in the games with only 3 objectives or 2 objectives, where it's, say, Emperor's Will, or some of the custom games, Warlord's really important. You want to kill your opponent's Warlord, you want to keep yours alive, and if your Warlord scores you some extra points or gives you some useful Warlord trait abilities, that's great. So in Tyranids, I think there's three actually interesting options for Warlords. One is to take the Tervagon only, and then you have no Warlord. And yep, you have an HQ choice that's required, but you aren't required to have a Warlord. And since he's not a character, he's not a Warlord. The other 2 options that I think have the most survivability and the most ability to really play with your opponent would be the Death Leaper. This is the actual Death Leaper model, and then a Tyranid Prime, and this is one I made up. You can see he's got a giant tail, but they don't get tail biomorphs. And the reason these are so survivable, I know everyone's going to say, but the Death Leaper's toughness 4, he dies, instant dies to a missile. Yeah, sure. He does. Here's why they're survivable. If you just want to deny your opponent Warlord, and you want to be able to do something like get Line Breaker, so you're basically taking a point away from your opponent and getting a point for yourself, Death Leaper's possibly one of the best possible choices for this in all 40k. Because he's a denial unit, because he's an HQ, so he's not going to be scoring. He deep strikes without any sort of error, so he deep strikes unerringly, and cannot be targeted with any weapons. You can only snap fire at him. So Death Leaper here, when he comes in, if you want to just deny and go for Line Breaker, take this guy, keep him in reserve. And he's going to come in, and you're going to put him in a corner somewhere and stick him behind a building where you can't even get a good line of shot on him. And should a unit decide to attack him, he does have a hit and run. He does have weapon skill 9, and he's strength 6. So, and rending, and he's got, I think, 5 attacks if he doesn't charge. I think he's 4 base. I'm not looking at his stats right now. Plus, he's got 2 weapons, Scything Talons and Rending Claws. So, he's a pretty solid guy. And if you really want to, let's say your opponent has presented you with the opportunity, he does get 2 victory points for every independent character he kills. There aren't that many independent characters in most armies. Maybe if you went up against Sisters of Battle or something, or some of the demon builds where there's just a lot of heralds or priests or something, then maybe he's okay. But I think his benefit is that he is so survivable by just putting him in a place where no one can get to him, and maybe deep striking him in, and the fact that he knocks leadership D3 off any character in the game. You pick it at basically the deployment stage. And it says while he's alive, but does not say while he's on the board. So, that's a cool boost. This guy plus a Synapse creature could knock, even let's say you had a leadership 10 Psyker, you could knock 6 off that person's leadership with Deathleaper and a Synapse creature, and even more if you took the data slate, the Deathleaper data slate, then you would knock 7 off that individual's leadership, which is very difficult to deal with, even if you're a level 10 Psyker. All right, the other option that I think's got high survivability is Tyranid Prime, because they're so customizable. They're independent characters. You can add things to them. You could give them regeneration. You could keep them just bare bones, which case they're the cheapest HQ choice, and they're independent characters, so you can attach them to a blob of Gants if you want. You can attach them to some Carnifex. You can attach them to any unit that's got multiple numbers to that unit. The Prime can be attached to him, and so he's survivable in part because, one, he's independent and he's small, so you could put him in a corner somewhere. And 2, he can be attached to other guys, so he has ablative wounds. If you stick him on with Termagants or Rippers, or even a bunch of wounds, he lives because they can sit in the corner, and you can give him the various special artifacts. So you could give him something like a miasma cannon, or you could give him the Norn Crown if you don't have a lot of Psykers, and with that, he sits somewhere. He gives boosts to the rest of your army. So I really think if you just want survivability on your Warlord, it's not a Hive Tyrant. Those are high priority targets. It's not Old One Eye. He's not that great. It's probably Deathleaper, and I think he's probably the most versatile in terms of being able to deny Warlord from your opponent, take Linebreaker, and he can do 3 things: deny Warlord, take Linebreaker, and contest an objective, because he's not a scoring unit, but he's a denial unit. So Deathleaper here, keep him in reserve. Just drop him in later in the game unerringly next to an objective. You can only snap fire at him, and he's got a decent weapon skill. He's not going to solo a monstrous creature, but he could probably embed himself in a bunch of Marines. His only weakness is that he is not Synapse and not Fearless.